High performance requires risk taking. Innovation requires risk taking. You need people who are able to give performance feedback, hold people accountable, challenge the status quo, name inconvenient truths, say no to something. So that whole, it's really interpersonal risk that we're talking about. You certainly need strategic risk taking, but you also need interpersonal risk taking.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, I'm here with Bill Benjamin. He's a partner at the Institute for Health and Human Potential, a keynote speaker, and he's worked with the United States Marine Corps and NASA, among others. And he's going to talk to us today about risk-taking and culture. Thanks for joining us today, Bill.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Love to have you. So excited when we were able to book this. So the question on everybody's mind right now, what is the Institute for Health and Human Potential? How do you help people? How did it come about?
Well, we're a research and learning institute, and my business partner, JP Palou, founded it about 27 years ago. I joined him about 24 years ago, and we started work in this whole area of risk-taking, of building high-performing teams and cultures centered around emotional intelligence. Then in the last 7 or 8 years, we've done a whole bunch of research around this thing we call the last 8%, and leveraging that to build high-performing teams and cultures.
Yeah, you were out there kind of at the real beginning of this. Emotional intelligence was a relatively new concept in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was certainly not being applied to the workplace or organizational behavior yet. So you guys are kind of pioneers in this, and you've continued to do amazing work over the years. Before we get into the risk-taking and culture pieces, what you have learned through your work are some really interesting things about how the brain reacts to certain kinds of questions. Tell us what you found out about that.
Well, I found out that my emotional brain has a pretty big impact on my cognitive brain and how I show up, and that we're all wired to process emotional responses first. That works when you're in the jungle and there's tigers chasing you. It doesn't work when you're in a meeting and someone says something that feels disrespectful, or somebody's not responding to you. So that same system that causes us to, avoid or fight a tiger is the same system that, again, when somebody's frustrating us, causes us to get triggered emotionally. And not only do we show up more reactively, more judgmentally, but we actually lose cognition. We lose some of us thinking. So as a guy with degrees in mathematics and computer science, when I first heard the term emotional intelligence, I thought, this is a bunch of soft and squishy kumbaya. But then I learned the brain science, and I learned I can't leverage my IQ if I'm triggered emotionally. So I learned that I have to manage my emotions in order to show up more effectively, especially as a leader.
Yeah, I remember being in the Air Force when I first heard about emotional intelligence and all of this, and thinking to myself, this will be just another thing we're not talking about in 2 or 3 years, so why bother? But as you said, the brain science is real. The research is there. The data is there.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is it's not just about how we can get ourselves reactive and get into those fight or flight modes. We can actually connect better with people by asking things like genuinely probing questions. What's
Absolutely.
The brain science behind that?
So statements trigger the emotional system of the other person. You should have done this. You've done that wrong. Whereas a genuinely probing question, what are your thoughts on that? What was that like for you? It actually requires their cognitive brain to engage, which automatically soothes their emotional brain. So, not only do you learn things, that you might not have known, not only do they get a chance to be heard, but you're actually helping their brain, work more effectively by just asking genuine probing questions.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about this, we're taught from the time we're young that there's 2 sides to every story. There's two parts to any interaction. It takes 2 to tango, right? And that's something positive we can do. If an interaction is starting to go south with someone, and we can break the pattern in ourselves, we can say, okay, I can salvage this. I can make this a little better by asking questions instead of just stating statements all the time.
Absolutely. And if you get really good at it, and I'm working at this, especially in my personal life, if you can not only ask questions, but actually validate the other person's point of view, doesn't mean agreeing, doesn't mean being wrong or giving in. It just means I can understand why you're feeling that way. I can understand why that was frustrating for you. I can understand why. So that adding in that validation is so powerful. It is so hard to do when you're triggered emotionally, but it's so powerful.
Yeah. What's some advice you give to people to help them recognize when they are triggered emotionally and break that pattern?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about your body as your early warning system. So you will actually, the chemicals that the emotional brain releases that puts you into fight or flight, your heart rate increases, your breathing shortens, um, your body will feel it first. So my chest gets tight. My hands shake a little bit. I was actually delivering this training to surgeons, and a couple of them are like, "Yeah, my hands shake." When I get triggered, I'm like, "You're a surgeon. You need to do something about that." People talk about feeling heat. I coached a woman who, whenever she was in a meeting with a difficult person, would get red in the neck area. So, of course, their clothing strategy for those meetings was, turtlenecks and scarves. So yeah, just so you'll stomach. So your body you'll know first in your body. That's the start.
So this starts long before we get into these situations of being aware of what our triggers are and how our body reacts to them.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the anticipation of a difficult event or a tough decision or giving somebody some tough feedback, we'll start to get anxious and nervous just thinking about it. That's the amazing part of the emotional brain. It doesn't differentiate between a real and a perceived threat.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we can never be reminded of too many times is the brain is fascinating. The brain is really, really good at what it does, but it interprets things, especially physical things, whether real or perceived, exactly the same way.
Exactly. So if you're in the jungle and there's a tiger and you hear wind rustling in the bushes, you have to assume that's a tiger. Now, there's two tigers. There's the real one and there's the one you're imagining reacting to. We do that all the time. We make most of our jump to judgment decisions on less than 5% of available information. We get a little bit of information. We amplify the negative because we have to, because we're fighting tigers. And then we react as though all of those negative thoughts are true.
Yeah, the discussion on alpha error and beta error is for another time. But yeah, if you folks 50,000 years ago who didn't assume it was a tiger probably didn't live very long to procreate, and the ones who did assume it was a tiger lived to fight another day, right?
Exactly. Yeah, this is old wiring. It just doesn't work when we're frustrated because someone's not listening to us, or we know we should have a tough conversation, but we're avoiding it. The flight response, because in our research, 68% of people, when faced with a difficult situation, what we call the last 8%, they avoid. They don't really step in and say that last part, the last 8%, or they sugarcoat it. Now, that's 68% of people. The other 32%, and I fall into this category sometimes, I might be in the difficult conversation. The other person starts reacting. Rather than avoiding, I step in, but I come on too strong, and now I'm making a mess of it. So we talk about people either being avoiders or make a messers in their tough moments.
Yep. So we can all hang out and wait for evolution of our brains to catch up with our modern society, which probably is not going to happen. Or we can take some advice from you and see how we can break these patterns and engage and interact with people in a more productive way.
Exactly. And that's the good news is this part of the brain can learn. So when I was first learning this, if I was in a meeting and somebody made a suggestion that felt like a criticism, I would immediately get defensive. Oh, well, what kind of leadership example does that set? Oh, Bill's not open. He doesn't listen. He doesn't but that part of my brain that gets defensive to criticism, I've been able to change that. I still don't love criticism, but I'm able to hear it. I'm able to listen and acknowledge the person. So that part of your brain can change.
It's definitely a skill that can be developed, and I know it's one I need to continue to practice.
We all do.
Now, as you mentioned, your background is in mathematics and computer science. What was the evolution of your career to where you are today?
Well, I worked at a computer software company for 14 years, and I was a high performer. And of course, what do organizations do with the high performers? Well, they give more work and burn them out, and then they make them a manager. So I was made a manager, And it turned out I wasn't very good at it. I got no training. My models of coaches were my high school basketball coaches and what I saw of college football coaches on TV. So I thought you just ran around and yelled at everybody and told them what to do. So it turned out I wasn't a very good leader. I didn't create a great culture on my team. And this was a time in my life when I was kind of stressed and anxious. And that was when I got exposed to this area of emotional intelligence. And, at first I thought, oh, that's just soft and squishy. But when I learned not only the brain science behind it, but the research that backs what a critical competency it is in terms of leadership and culture, that really opened me up to it. But to be honest, it was really that brain science, because those chemicals are getting released when you get triggered emotionally. One of the chemicals is cortisol. That's your stress hormone. So if you're getting triggered on a regular basis, you're releasing stress hormones into your body, which is not good for you. And there's many ways to manage stress, sleep, diet, exercise, etc. But managing your reactions and emotions so you're not adding more cortisol is actually really helpful. So it was a very personal, kind of awakening for me that I needed to improve in this area, both in terms of leadership, but also for my personal life.
Yeah, and you can't be blamed too much for that, because that was how things were done back then. We didn't know the science. The scientists didn't know the science about this brain science back then. Most of our examples growing up of leadership was someone telling other people what to do and people doing it. And it wasn't until I got out of officer training into the military and on active duty that I started to see, oh, this is what real leadership is. This is what it means to inspire people. This is what it means to bring people along the journey. And as new officers, we were all kind of puzzled because we've been yelled at for 4 years and that's training. This is how we do things on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I actually remember once I was delivering a program at the U.S. Army, their Army Management Staff College, and I was talking about emotional intelligence and the importance of it, and someone puts up their hand and says, wait a minute, what about the drill sergeant in basic training? I mean, they're just there to ride you, and they yell at you, and I thought, oh boy, I don't know how to answer that, so I did what any good speaker does and says, well, what do you all think? I always remember someone put their hand up and said, there's the drill sergeant who's doing it because they want you to be the best soldier you can be. They want you to be safe on the battlefield. Then there's the one that's doing it because it's a power trip and it's all about them. So even in that kind of a role, there's an emotional intelligence and authenticity that can really change your effectiveness.
Well, and here's what's crazy about it is we've been doing basic training kind of the same way since the Prussians invented it almost 300 years ago. And what's crazy about it is without knowing any of the science behind it, they found what worked. And as we learned more about the science over the last 30 or 40 years, we found, what we're doing in basic training scenarios, officer scenario trainings, is working to get the kind of people out the back end that we want. People who are focused and disciplined and have attention to detail. I always tell people, when you go to basic training, they're going to tell you how to fold your socks. They're going to make sure you do it perfectly. It's not because we care about how people fold their socks.
Right.
We want to see people focusing on attention to detail, trying to do something right the first time, every time. And then the most important thing, and they won't tell you this right away in basic training or officer training, they want to see if you make the connection to if someone in your flight or your squad or your platoon or your fire team or whatever it's called is having trouble, do you step up to help them do it better?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to create in people in basic training, not people who are just really good at folding socks.
Makes sense. I mean, I think you're also trying to, create very resilient people. So you put them through a lot of challenging, difficult situations to see how they handle it. And are they resilient?
Absolutely. And what's really interesting, like I said, we found things hundreds of years ago that worked. The science backs it up. And then there are some things we found over the last 20 or 30 years that the science says, maybe that's not working to get those resilient people out the end. Maybe in some ways we're making them more brittle. We're putting some more ego into them, that kind of thing. And so we've stopped doing those kinds of things and focused on other things.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So what was it about the work the Institute was doing that got you interested in connecting up with them?
I mean, it was really this whole area of recognizing when you're responding and reacting emotionally and what impact that's having on the people you lead, on the people in your personal life. I mean, that's the great thing about this work and last 8% moments. I mean, they show up at work and at home. and most importantly for me, the impact it was having on me personally. So it was affecting my success. It was affecting my personal relationships. It was affecting, me and even my own mental health. And so that's what got me really engaged. And I had a really good career in the computer software field. I was a vice president at a computer software company. I left that, to do this, to start a business with my business partner and do this for a living. So that's how much it impacted me and made a difference for me personally.
Absolutely. So tell us what an amygdala hijack is and how it fit into your journey.
Well, the amygdala is the emotional part of the brain that I described. So that is the center of your emotional brain. That is the part that when a tiger jumps out at you in the jungle, within 85 milliseconds, it causes the release of chemicals into your body, cortisol, adrenaline, blood goes to the major muscle groups, your heart rate increases, your breathing shortens. It also releases chemicals in the brain that reduces your working memory, reduces your ability to think complex thoughts. So it is the fight or flight. We use the language avoid, make a mess, part of your brain that again, is there. It serves us when we're in the jungle, but that amygdala and the amygdala hijack doesn't necessarily typically doesn't serve us in some sort of business leadership area. And so I was getting triggered emotionally. I was getting hijacked. I was either avoiding things or, yelling and making a mess. And that just wasn't effective. And so I had to learn how to, A, understand that that's not effective, and B, learn how to manage myself more effectively.
Yeah. And I think all of us who came up at a certain time, again, we have to kind of practice that every day, right? Because that's the example that was set for us for many, many years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's hardwired. Again, the good news is like when I say hardwired, the good news is the wiring can be changed. And I certainly have changed quite a bit over the years. I'm not perfect. My teenage daughters will tell you that. But I know I've changed quite a bit over the years. So yeah, you can rewire your brain. That's the great thing about it.
Yeah, it's a positive sign for all of us. So why is risk taking important? Because we talked about running from the tiger in the woods, the rustle in the bushes.
Yeah,
why is risk taking important? And what are some of the different kinds of risk taking?
Yeah, so the Navy has a great quote, which is ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for. In order to create if we talk corporate business, leading teams, high performance requires risk taking. Innovation requires risk taking. You need people who are able to give performance feedback, hold people accountable, challenge the status quo, name inconvenient truths, say no to something. So that whole it's really interpersonal risk that we're talking about. You certainly need strategic risk taking, but you also need interpersonal risk taking. And so that's really what our work is about, because so many clients we work with have what we call a family culture. We have our last 8% culture map that's high connection. So there's care, there's trust, people feel valued, but low courage. So it's more of a family culture. It's a nice culture, but people aren't willing to do hard things. And so that's really that whole adding in risk taking. And it's not, by the way, it's not about sacrificing connection. You can add courage in, you can have both. And so our work is really about maintaining or building that connection, that trust piece, and then layering in the risk taking, the tough conversations, the tough decisions.
Yeah, and I want to dive into the culture map in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about, you've mentioned it a couple times. I want to dig into it a little deeper. Tell us about the last 8% and the study you did that led you to understanding the last 8%.
Yeah, I hope we have your listeners wondering what it is now, curious to find out. So this concept came about 8 years ago. We were coaching two executives at a large company who weren't getting along, like that ever happens. And they were coached to have a conversation with each other about the impact they were having on each other. So they go and they have the conversation. They come back from the conversation. They're talking to their individual coaches, and the coach says, "How did it go?" They both say, "Oh, went fine." Well, the coaches know better. So the coaches pushed and said, "Yes, but did you really say everything that we agreed you would say to that person?" And they both essentially said, "I got 85, 90, 95% of the way there. The other person started reacting, and I held back. I didn't really step in and say that last 5 or 10%. So we took that concept that resonates with just about everyone, did a study of 34,000 people, and determined that on average, it's 7.56%, which we rounded up to 8, that people feel they leave unsaid in a difficult conversation. Now, as we workshopped it, people said, well, it's actually not just difficult conversations. There's the tough decisions. There's the easy ones where everyone's agreeing and everyone's going to be happy and I'm not taking a risk. But then there's those tough decisions where someone's going to be unhappy, or I don't know how it's going to work out. I might fail. Those last 8% decisions have a huge impact on our success.
I think that's a really important point I want to underline. It's not just about conversations and what we say to people where we hold back. This brain, the brain science shows that we as human beings, based on this evolutionary wiring, often hold back on these more risky decisions that often we know are the right things to do, but we don't follow through on them. And I want to make sure we underline that, because someone listening, someone watching right now may be great at having the difficult conversations. And I would encourage all to think about, what are the decisions we've also left on the table as part of that 8%?
Absolutely. That's why I love that quote, ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for. If we're only making decisions on things that we're 95, 100% sure are going to work out, we're probably not, growing as much as we could, or, leveraging the opportunities as much as we could. I know I used to make decisions sometimes based on who was going to scream the loudest if they didn't get their way. So I didn't always make the best decision. I made the easiest one, so I didn't have to deal with that person. But it's also about, taking risks around things that, might not work out. Saying no to someone, that's hard for a lot of people. That's a decision. That's both a decision and a conversation. So yes, there are many, many situations that aren't just conversations that involve risk taking that lead to higher performance, greater innovation, greater connection.
Yeah. And I also think it's important to point out there's a difference between having these difficult conversations and doing what everyone says is being authentic now, right? Just telling people you don't like them isn't really having a difficult conversation or making a difficult decision. That's right. That's not what this last 8% is about. Is just being antagonistic to people, right?
We when we do culture work with clients, we're very clear. Last 8% isn't about being mean or being a bully. It is, though, about stepping in, pushing through that discomfort of stepping into the last 8% moment and then stepping in, but doing it skillfully. So it really is finding that middle ground between avoiding it and making a mess. So yeah, absolutely. That is at the end of the day, the core skill.
So if you find you're really comfortable pointing out people's flaws, just remember there may be some other work we need to do here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're approaching it in a developmental way, in a way where they know you care about them and they know you have their best interest in mind, and you're doing it skillfully, then that's a different story, right? Then you're coaching and developing, parenting, whatever it is. So a lot of it has to do with the how you do it.
Yeah, that's much more well said than I think I could have said it. So I want to take a break from these questions for a little while. I want to play a game. Are you up for a game?
I love games.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Now, that doesn't mean you need to give a one-word answer. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like. We're here to get to know Bill Benjamin a little bit. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to know you a little bit the way the other questions might not let us learn about you. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Bill Benjamin, rapid response round. Your time begins now. Podcast recommendation.
I mean, I love anything from Adam Grant. I love anything from Josh Linkner. And of course Jason LeDuc.
Yeah, that's the only answer we don't accept on here is this podcast, because I mainly ask that question to find out new podcasts I can go listen to.
Okay.
But I know we appreciate it. But Adam Grant is great, especially Rethinking. If you are not listening to Rethinking, please check it out and go read that book. That was kind of eye-opening to me about how Adam's research shows we should be rethinking a lot of our decisions.
I also love Amy Edmondson's work around psychological safety. And she has lately shifted to, kind of more what our view is that psychological safety is critical and it's not enough. you also need courage. You need to teach people skills to do difficult things, to do hard things. But she does great work.
And that's a great preview of what we're going to get into after we play the game here. What is a practice you'd like to see more people embrace?
Empathy.
I think that's a good one. We hear that one a lot.
Yeah.
Someone we should all be paying attention to.
Someone we should all be paying attention to. I don't want to keep giving the same answer, but I love Adam Grant's little, like, the little memes, not memes, but little kind of word clips he puts on LinkedIn, because they're very thoughtful and they really challenge you around how you're behaving and how you're showing up and how you're leading. So I'll give that same answer.
Yeah, Adam Grant is a great follow on LinkedIn, and also on X, I think we're calling it now, because he will put up those little word quotes, but he will also put up, every so often, he'll put up a graph from his research or somebody else's research, and he'll elaborate on how we want to think about this as leaders, how we want to think about these developments in an organizational sense.
Yeah.
What is either your get pumped up song or your walk on music?
So I get asked that because I keynote speak. The answer I love to give is the Humpty Dance. But I think people know I'm joking. I use Sweet Emotion, because I'm talking about emotional intelligence and I love that song. So that's my walk-up song.
Sweet Emotion is great, and I would honestly pay cash money for a keynote speaker to walk up to the Humpty Dance.
Exactly.
Cash money. That's on the table for anyone watching. Who is the biggest influence in your life?
Honestly, it's my teenage daughters, because anybody who has kids know they mirror, they come right back at you. Dad, I saw you speak, and you're not supposed to act like that, and so they're and plus it's so important to me that I model for them, especially being young women, speaking up, advocating for themselves, expressing their needs. And so they are absolutely the most influential people in my life.
Yeah, it's tough raising a young woman right now, and it's tough trying to give them that advice. I remember during my time in the Air Force, I had a number of young women working for me, and honestly, and it's hindsight, but the best advice I could give them was be more like a guy. And that doesn't work. So
no, and what we like to say is, don't worry your kids aren't listening to you, because they're not going to take your advice. Worry they're watching everything you do. They are modeling. They grow up to model, your behaviors, and so they are, especially fathers for daughters. They are watching it and modeling your behavior. So you have a big impact. And the other key is you're not going to be perfect, and it's okay not to be perfect. And you want to teach them it's okay not to be perfect. So you can say, hey, you know what, Daddy shouldn't have got upset at that, or I wish I'd said something about that. Like, it's, I'm going to do better next time. Like, you own when you're not perfect. You model that for them, because boy, they grow up. Society tells them they need to be perfect, and that is just the wrong message.
That's great. Come to the leader's mindset for the leadership advice. Stick around for the parenting advice.
Exactly.
What is a book everyone should read?
I love Awareness by Anthony DeMello, because it really challenges you to look at who you are, how you're showing up, what are your real motivations. I mean, one of his quotes is, "Nobody loves anybody. They love who they think they should be and what they think they should be getting from them. And, do you actually truly ever," and, he says very provocative things like that. And I don't know that I fully agree with that, but that idea that, do we really love someone, or do we love our expectation of how we think they should be? So I do love that book.
I think it's a really fair question that we can ask ourselves on a number of levels.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part about the holiday season?
My spending time with my girls. I mean, I know I keep giving the same answer, but I also, I like the time to recharge. The time to relax, the time to exercise, get some things done that I've been avoiding. So just that downtime is just, because we all need that, right? Like I work hard, and so to have that downtime to spend with family, to spend with friends, I love so much.
That's great. And speaking of recharging, what is your dream vacation spot?
Well, I love cycling and beaches. And so anywhere that has both beaches and mountains, because cycling in the mountains is really amazing. So that could be Vancouver, Canada. That could be a coast of California. That could be the Amalfi Coast in Italy. So anywhere that has those two of my favorite things, beaches and cycling.
Outstanding. What is a trend you're excited about?
Yeah, it's funny. It's the amount of change and uncertainty that organizations are facing, and the degree to which they're recognizing addressing that isn't just about processes and structure, and they're getting that it's about people. They're getting that it's about equipping people, leaders, starting with leaders, to manage through all this uncertainty. Because, by the way, coming back to the discussion about the amygdala, the emotional brain, the amygdala, does not like change. It doesn't like uncertainty because it doesn't feel safe. It's there to protect us. So as soon as there's any change, it immediately triggers, it amplifies the negative, assumed, we've done this before, this isn't going to work out, I'm going to... So organizations recognizing that in order to thrive with all this change and uncertainty and innovate requires, teaching people those skills. And that, yes, AI can automate a lot of, administrative tasks. It can even do some creative thinking, but it can't do that. It can't do the emotional connection. It can't do, full innovation. And that those are actually the really critical skills for organizations to have. So I love that trend that organizations are recognizing the importance of the people element.
Yeah, and here's what's great about AI. For decades, we have said, I would do more mentoring with my people. I would help teach them the skills that we wish they had that they didn't come here with. And now with AI, all those administrative tasks that were taking up so much of our time, that's either gone or going to be gone for most of us. So now we can really spend the time with the people that we've always said we wanted to do. Let's see if everybody actually follows through and does it.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. Even so, when I work with an organization, if I'm going to go in and speak, I want to know that organization as much as I can, and they're going to tell me as much as they can, in a pre-call. But when I use AI to research and get back, it's amazing the stuff it comes up with. And I'll ask them about it. Oh, that's a good point. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, that's really important. Like just to use for me to be able to use AI to get to know a client, both the individual and the organization is incredibly powerful. I love how much it can help make the connection.
It really is an amazing technology. I caught myself this morning, responding to something like you said, oh, that's a really great point. Briefly forgetting all it is a prediction engine. It's just predicting what the correct next word in the statement should be. But it really does help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So last one, favorite sports team or player?
Michael Jordan. I lived in Chicago when he was, winning all those titles. What a competitor, what a talent. Just loved Michael Jordan. And then, the Buffalo Bills, because I grew up in Toronto. And so back in my day, you only got one game every Sunday, and that was the game. And that's when they were going to 4 Super Bowls. And yes, I wish they'd won one, but they still went to 4 Super Bowls. They were incredibly successful. So Michael Jordan and the Buffalo Bills are my answer to that question.
Which is great. And yes, you may have only gotten one game every week in Toronto, but you guys also got Hockey Night in Canada, which we still do not have a good an equivalent of yet.
You do not. Yeah.
So we need to get on that, hockey guys. All right. Thanks for playing our game. It's nice to get to know you a little bit in the way
That's fine. Just so your listeners know, I did not get those questions ahead of time. You could tell I started on a few of them. So yeah, you don't give those ahead of time. So that's the real me. That's your real guest responding.
That's what we're going for. We're looking for the spontaneity, and we're looking to get to know the real you. So
yeah.
So to get back to it, you talked about psychological safety. We've talked about the 8%, the last 8% a little bit. We've danced around the idea of courage needs to be part of this a little bit. You did a study of 72,000 people that looks at culture that ties all this together. So tell us all about what you learned.
Yeah, I mean, we learned a lot, but one of the main things we learned, and I already alluded to this, is that there's two key pillars to a high performing culture, to a high performing team, to a high performing leader, actually. But when we think of culture, one is connection, what we just talked, psychological safety, feeling valued, having a voice, belonging. Most organizations, when they do culture work, when they do values work, they focus on that, and it's critical, but it misses the second key pillar, which is courage, the ability to do hard, skillfully do difficult things. And we took those two pillars and we created a culture map, and it's a 4x4, so it's a 2x2, sorry, 4 quadrants. So if you think of a culture that is high in courage but low in connection, that's a transactional culture where results matter over relationships. It's more of a make a mess, blame environment. A toxic behavior is tolerated. It's high stress, high burnout. It can achieve results over the short term. It's not sustainable over the long term. Now, if you think of an opposite culture that's high in connection but low in courage, and I referred to this earlier, that's a family culture. A nice culture, but people are unwilling to do hard things. There aren't high standards of performance. Accountability is inconsistent. Decision making is slow because you got to make everyone happy. Most of our clients, and in our research, 37% of teams are in a family culture, the highest percent. And it's a great foundation, right? You want that high care, you want that trust, but it's not enough to be high performing. What you need is to be both high care and high courage, which we call a last 8% culture, that's characterized by high care and high accountability. And you can have both together. That's a feedback rich culture. And by the way, when we say feedback rich, we don't just mean managers giving employees performance feedback, although that's important. When you have a team that has a norm of giving each other feedback, of holding each other accountable, then they're holding each other accountable. And that's great as a leader because then you don't have to do it. Right? The team is holding themselves accountable and giving each other feedback. So it's really feedback rich in all directions. By the way, it's feedback up, feedback across. And so those cultures are high experimentation, high innovation because it's okay to take risks. It's safe to fail. It's safe to challenge someone's idea. It's safe to speak up. So those are really, really high performing cultures, but it's high connection and high courage.
Yeah, and I want to dig into the family culture a little bit because I see, especially here in Las Vegas, a lot of small businesses, a lot of startups talk about we run our business like a family, and we talked in the abstract a little bit about why that's not as good as having the high connection, high
Yeah.
courage culture. But you study this 72,000 people. What are
Yeah.
some of the real impacts on a business that embraces this family culture and doesn't try to move into that
Yeah.
high connection, high courage culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great observation, Jason. So by the way, we always say, because a lot of times clients will say, oh, we're a family. And we'll say, no, you're not. You're not actually a family. You don't fire your lowest performing kid. You might want to on some days, but you don't. So we have an assessment where we can assess a team, an organization on where they're at on that culture map. And a couple of the questions that most organizations score low on is, and I've referred to some of this, we name inconvenient truths, difficult to discuss issues on this team. That's hard. The benchmark, our data is only 37% of teams are good at that. 37%, that's really low. You know what happens when
Honestly, higher than I expected.
okay, and some teams are lower than that. But you know what happens when inconvenient truths aren't named. Then the issue isn't dealt with. But then there's the meeting after the meeting to talk about what was said in the meeting. It's incredibly unproductive and ineffective. Another question, and again, this is something we already talked about, is we have a feedback-rich culture on this team where managers and peers give feedback to each other. So that low that low feedback-rich environment. People are willing to take risks. It's I feel safe to take a risk on this team. Is another question that sometimes you score low on when you're a family culture because you don't want to disappoint people.
Yeah, and there are real business impacts to that. It could mean you're not innovating because people aren't coming forward with innovative ideas, or they're not standing up for their innovative ideas, right?
Yes.
It could mean losing your competitive edge when a new entrant comes into the market
Yeah.
because you're not fostering this culture that includes courage to say,
Yeah.
okay, someone's coming to eat our lunch. What are we really going to do about it?
Yeah. And interestingly, in addition to affecting innovation, it affects performance because performance conversations aren't happening, accountability conversations aren't happening, but it also affects retention. Now you'd think, oh, it's a family culture where everyone's being nice to each other. But when performance issues aren't being dealt with, the people who get the most frustrated are the high performers because they see underperformance being accepted. They see, toxic behavior, not being addressed. They get frustrated and they leave. So it actually affects retention and engagement of the high performers when the low performers aren't dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah. Your high performers leave. So think about that if you're running your business like a family.
Exactly. And you're in particular, and specifically, you're not addressing both behavioral and performance issues because you also have the high performer who gets the results, but they're leaving bodies in their wake. They're having a negative impact. Or
yeah. And I don't think we talked about the low connection, low courage
yes.
environment. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's your old fear-based culture. And that's more command and control. That's what you and I talked about many, many years ago. That was the much more common approach. The leader just yelled at everybody, told them what to do, and they did it or they were out. So we see a lot less of that these days. Only 16% of teams, that we've done research on are in a fear-based culture, but 16% isn't nothing. There's still some teams that are in that in that area.
It's still higher than you'd like. Time critical, mission critical situations aside, because there are times in the military where we were like, this is not a time for discussion. This is a time for you to listen to me point over there and go over there because there's inbound fire coming.
Yeah. So there was an interesting research done. You may have seen this, that command and control style of leadership is required in 3% of military interactions on the field of battle, just like what you just described. The other 97%, back behind the lines, back at the base, back at home, it's not an effective leadership style. So 3% is what they determined.
It sounds about right based on my experience. So,
and you would know better than me, much better than me. Yep.
So we've talked about where companies fall. What's great about this, just like the last 8%, just like the brain science stuff, we're not fixed. We're not stuck with this.
Correct.
How can we move our organizations across the quadrants?
So, that's where we're so excited about our last 8% culture system, where we actually work with a team or an organization and we say we can change your culture in months, not years. Now, we don't mean 2 months. We mean, kind of 6 to 9 months. But we have a whole process where we start with assessment. So you gotta know where you are, right? You gotta know where the opportunities are. By the way, in our assessment, we assess level in the organization. So it's great the senior team thinks they're a high performing culture, but at other levels in the organization, you may get different results. We can assess by department or function. Well, marketing says this, but engineering is this, and so we really look at an organization in detail, identify where the opportunity is, and then always start with the senior leadership team. Whether that's, we work with the CEO, Jim Voss of Tenneco Automotive, a 65,000 person auto parts manufacturer, or, Nina Patil at Jazz Pharmaceutical. She's the chief legal officer with 120 employees. So, regardless of where we're starting, we're always starting with that senior leader who is passionate about people, who is inspired and is willing to work on themselves, is willing to say, I own this culture. I have to model it. And then there's senior team buy-in. So we take the assessment, we work with the CEO and the senior team. Once they're modeling, because what happens when you try to do leadership and culture in an organization where the senior team aren't modeling it, it's so demotivating for the mid-level. So once the senior team are modeling it, then we cascade down to the rest of the organization with what we call our sprint process, which is really enabling each team leader. So we're not doing it. HR isn't doing it. Each team leader is actually bringing this culture work to their teams in their weekly meetings. So it's in the flow of work. We get the whole organization doing it at once. And we get incredible feedback from people about the quality of conversations that are happening. I mean, people often, they don't talk about what does this team do when there's a last 8% moment? I'm more of an avoider. I'm more make a messer. Yeah, we know that. Like these conversations don't typically happen, and people get to know each other, and then they make agreements. They come up with their tenets of how they want to show up for each other in their tough moments. And it really, really bonds them. It really, really helps drive and change behavior. So we've just had great success with being able to actually change behavior in organizations and change a culture.
Yeah, it's so important for the senior leadership to be not just on board with this, but modeling it.
Yeah.
Because I can look back at my time in the Air Force, and about once a year, something like this would come along where we're making a change, we're adopting a new model, not just necessarily leadership stuff, but process stuff, administrative stuff, operational stuff. And then if you've been not just in the military, if you've been in any workplace for any length of time, everyone on the front lines, everyone in the front level of management just kind of subconsciously says, all right, let's wait and see. Let's see where we are in 2 months.
Yeah.
And most of the time in 2 or 3 months, senior leadership either hasn't been modeling it or they've moved on to something else. And subconsciously, we all say on the front lines, couldn't have been that important. And then that colors our impression of the next thing that comes along.
Absolutely. Early on, when we were first doing this work, we made the mistake of having a senior leader and a senior team saying, well, no, we're good. We're good at this. The team really needs this. We don't need that. So it's so wrong. We get into the middle layer and they're like, oh, they're not following this. And of course, it just didn't have the outcome that we wanted. But the cool thing is, because we have a time one assessment, we then, after the 6 or 9 months, we do a time two assessment, and we can see the significant changes we've made, and we've made some really significant changes. With that particular client, not a lot changed. We had some change, but not the degree that we felt, really would move the needle for them. So yeah, we won't work with a client if that senior leader and the senior team aren't engaged and aren't, committed to being part of the rollout.
Well, and what's great about the scientific and data-driven approach you've taken to this is that you have all of this data, so you can go back and say, I understand what you're saying. You think you're good at this. We have doubts about if you're good at it or not, but companies that have embraced what we've been talking about, they're performing up here now. Companies that haven't are still performing at the same level they were performing at a year later, whatever the data is, but you've got the data to show that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, attracted to me to this organization is we are a research and learning institute. So we look at others' research, but we also do our own research. And then again, as a guy with, degrees in mathematics, I don't want stuff that, 2 guys and a bottle of wine made up one night. I want to know there's research and brain science behind it. So it is one of the things that I love about this work that we do.
Absolutely. So as the years have gone by, is there anything you've learned about the brain science and leadership? We talked about Adam Grant and rethinking a little bit ago. Is there anything you've rethought over the years as you've learned more about the brain science?
I never thought empathy was important. I thought my ability to articulate, be passionate, to know the right answer, to drive people, I thought that was enough. And I learned that it isn't. People won't go to the wall for you if they feel like you don't really care about them. You don't have their best interest in mind. You're really in it just for yourself. So that ability, and I don't mean manipulative empathy. I'm going to pretend like care about you. I mean the actual, you care about people and you are able to understand what drives them, and what gets in their way, what triggers them. And because ultimately it does help you perform, right? But that's not the reason you're doing it. But when you can truly understand people and validate them, then they're more likely to go to the wall for you. They're more likely to give you their best. By the way, they're more likely to give you feedback. I'm sure you've heard the term CEO's disease. The higher you go in an organization, the less candid feedback you get. If they feel like you don't care about them, you don't have their best, they're not going to take the risk to give you feedback. So just that, and that empathy isn't something soft and squishy. It isn't therapy conversations. It's just getting out of your own frame of reference, stop worrying about yourself, and thinking about what's going on for that other person. What's driving them? What might be getting in their way? What are they afraid of? Why might they be avoiding or making a mess? And connecting with that, not because you're going to be wrong or not because you're going to give in. You're still going to step in and hold them accountable, give performance feedback, make a decision they don't agree with, but they're so much more likely to jump and follow you if you started, we call it on their side of the bridge, if you start on their side, understanding them and they feel heard and valued. So that empathy piece is just, been a huge life changer. And by the way, never mind with your kids and your spouses and partners. It's even more important. They don't care about your authority, your job knowledge, or any of that stuff, right? So that whole empathy thing has been huge for me with my kids and my relationships.
I love that. What's coming up for you and the Institute for Health and Human Potential in the next few months?
Well, right now we're talking to publishers about our new book. So JP and I, my business partner, we're co-writing it. And in fact, it's mostly written. The manuscript's mostly written. So in the next month or so, maybe even less, we'll choose a publisher. It's going to be called The Last 8%. Everything else still TBD in terms of, subtitle and cover art and all that stuff that, the publishers help with. But yeah, we got a book coming out. Again, it'll probably be about a year. But we're excited, and we'll start. Obviously, we'll start. Letting stuff out earlier than that around the book. But it's a lot of it's all of what we just discussed. So that's what we're excited about is our upcoming book.
Well, that's fantastic. I look forward to that, and we'll have to have you back on when the book is out or about to come out.
I would love to come back on. You ask great questions.
Oh, glad to hear that. So as we wrap up, what's something practical that we can all start doing today to rise to the occasion and meet those 8% moments?
This is going to sound so simple, but it's so powerful. When you are either facing a last 8% moment, because there's two types. There's the expected type. That's 42% people rate, where you're going to give somebody some bad news. They're going to be upset about something. Then there's the 58%, the unexpected last 8% moments. You're going about your day and everything's fine, and suddenly someone moves a deadline on you or somebody gives you some tough feedback. In either case, just start with a deep breath, because the chemicals that the amygdala releases when it's feeling triggered, they are countered by the intake of a large amount of oxygen. You're actually fighting chemistry with chemistry. So just take that deep breath before, you step into a tough conversation, or when somebody's coming at you with something. You will be amazed at how much of your better self you'll get back. You'll actually start to get some working memory back, so you can think more clearly. You'll also be a little less reactive, a little less judgmental. You can be more curious. That breathing is just so powerful. So that's one just a hack everyone knows, but we forget to use it, and we don't always remember when, the right time to use it.
Yeah, we do. I know I forget. And so everybody do it. Take that deep breath. It's science, so no arguing. But this has been great, Bill. I want to thank you for joining us today. Where can everyone find you so they can also thank you for being on the show?
Awesome. So two places. One, our website is Institute for Health and Human Potential, which is IHHP.com. That's a bit of a mouthful. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So Bill Benjamin, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I love to answer questions. I love to have people challenge me. So look forward to getting connected with folks on LinkedIn too.
Outstanding. And we'll get all those links in the episode description so no one has to go look those up.
I don't remember them, yeah.
Yeah, thank you again for being with us today, Bill. I want to thank all of you for watching or listening, however you're getting this. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. I think we all know a lot of people who can use this conversation. Please leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're on a podcast platform and can give us a 5-star review, please go ahead and do that. It helps build our audience and get great conversations like the one we just had with Bill out to more people. We've got lots more of these conversations coming your way, so go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.